Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe it was the mop bucket, or maybe it was easier to pretend the woman cleaning their footprints didn't exist. Either way, inside the Navy's firing range that morning, Ren Talovich was invisible. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and arrogance. Spent brass casings clinked across the concrete as a group of SEAL candidates showed off, their laughter ricocheting louder than their rifles. A janitor's silhouette moved in the background, gray coveralls, steel bucket, rubber soles squeaking faintly with each stroke of the mop. She was part of the scenery, background noise. Commander Riker Blackwood stood at the far end of the range, a coffee in hand, watching his men prepare. The faint hum of fluorescent lights flickered against his face, revealing the kind of weariness that comes from too many years of command and too little gratitude. He didn't even look at her, not really. He looked through her, as if she were a ghost drifting across his facility. Ren moved with methodical grace, her mop tracing perfect wet arcs across the concrete floor. She wasn't fast. She was deliberate, every motion efficient, almost military in its rhythm. But no one noticed. The range doors opened with a metallic bang. 8 men entered, loud, confident, smelling of oil and victory. SEAL candidates, still young enough to believe that silence was weakness. Leading them was Chief Petty Officer Thaddeus Evercraftoff, Thod to his men, a walking sculpture of muscle and ego. His trident tattoo glistened just below his sleeve, and his voice carried that mix of authority and mockery reserved for those who have never truly failed. "Range is hot in 5, Commander Blackwood called out, setting his mug aside. "Today determines who leads the next phase of training. Best marksman gets command privileges." Ren kept mopping. Thod gave a cocky half-grin. "Copy that, Commander." His team started unpacking cases, assembling M4s, checking optics. It was all noise and swagger. But one candidate, Callum Marsh, stood apart. Lean, deliberate. His movements slower, his posture less performative. He didn't shout the hoo-yah-s or joke with the others. He just adjusted his rifle and waited. Thod noticed, of course. Alpha types always do. "Loosen up, Marsh," he called. "You shoot like you're at a funeral." The others laughed, too loud, too eager. Ren didn't flinch. She just wrung out her mop, eyes down. The first rounds cracked downrange, echoing like controlled thunder. The smell of gunpowder thickened, mixing with bleach from her bucket. Thod's grouping was near perfect. He knew it too. He paused between volleys, giving unsolicited advice in that patronizing tone instructors love. "Exhale completely before you squeeze, Marsh. You're pulling right. Those are housewife hands you got there." Laughter again, the kind that stings because it's meant to. Ren's mop handle stopped mid-swipe, just for a second, then it moved again. When the next set of targets needed changing, she approached the bench to collect shell casings. Her gaze brushed the table of rifles and paused. The M40A6 sniper rifle sat there, its matte black frame spotless under the overhead lights. Her eyes lingered on it a beat too long. A flicker of something passed across her face, not nostalgia, not longing, something colder, calculation. Thod caught it, and of course he couldn't resist. "You'll scratch the barrel, sweetheart," he said loud enough for the entire range to hear. "Those aren't your cleaning supplies." The room filled with laughter again, sharp, easy, thoughtless. Ren didn't react, didn't look up, just moved her bucket 2 steps aside. But Commander Blackwood noticed. His jaw tightened, though he said nothing. When the exercise ended, Thod had the top score, no surprise there. His team clapped him on the back as he strutted toward the exit. Blackwood made a note on his clipboard, then turned toward the janitor. "You seemed interested in the targets, Ms. Talovich," he said. His voice was casual, but the use of her name turned heads. Ren looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. Her accent, faint, Eastern European, colored her response. "Just wondering how soon they'll need replacing, sir. Paperwork takes time." The men chuckled again, mistaking practicality for humor. "Carry on," Blackwood murmured. When the last of them filed out, Wren was alone again. The silence returned like an old friend. She finished the firing line, collected the debris, and only when she was sure no one was watching did she stop. From her coverall pocket, she drew a small, creased photograph. 4 women stood shoulder to shoulder against a barren desert backdrop, dust and sun glare blurring the image. Their faces were young but hard. The rifles they carried, long-range sniper platforms, not standard issue, told a story the Pentagon never did. Wren traced one corner of the photo with her thumb, then tucked it away as the sound of footsteps echoed in the hall. The door opened. Her back straightened. "Morning shift still on," Blackwood's voice. "Yes, sir," she replied, calm as ever. He studied her for a moment, then left. She waited until the silence settled again. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled, a small, private smile. The kind that comes from knowing something no one else in the room ever will. 2 weeks passed. The training cohort grew tense. Leadership positions were on the line, and Thod made sure everyone knew who sat on top. Callum's confidence faltered under the pressure, and under Thod's quiet sabotage. It started small. A weapon that jammed once too often, a scope that suddenly drifted, a whisper of operator error that spread like smoke. Wren saw it, she saw everything. From the far corner of the range, mop in hand, she watched Thod inspect Callum's rifle after a malfunction, saw his fingers twist a windage knob just a fraction too far, subtle enough that even a range officer wouldn't notice. When Blackwood caught her eye, Wren gave the faintest shake of her head. Not yet. That night she stayed after hours. The facility was quiet, the ocean wind sighing faintly against the windows. In the armory, surrounded by shadow and steel, she moved with the familiarity of someone who'd lived her life around weapons. Callum's rifle sat on the bench. She picked it up, sighted down the barrel, adjusted the scope with delicate precision. One small correction, one small act of balance. By morning, the rifle shot perfectly. Callum noticed. At lunch, he approached her, cautious but respectful. "Mind if I sit here, ma'am?" Wren gestured to the empty seat. Neither invitation nor refusal. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly. "Someone fixed my rifle." "I report maintenance issues when I see them," she replied evenly. "Part of my job." He studied her, reading between lines. "My grandmother served in Desert Storm. Adeline Marrow, you ever hear of her?" Wren froze just for a breath, then continued eating. Many faces from those days. "She said the real heroes were the ones nobody ever heard about," Callum said. "The ones who did what needed doing." Wren looked up at him, eyes gray, unreadable. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," he hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "She left me this." A challenge coin, but not Navy issue. Simple design, an eye within a crosshair. No words, no motto. Wren's fingers stilled around her sandwich. For a second, the cafeteria noise faded. "She said it belonged to the Watchers," Callum continued. "People who made sure everyone else got home safe." Before she could answer, the loudspeaker called the SEAL candidates back to training. He tucked the coin away, stood, and nodded politely. Wren sat in silence, eyes distant, heart somewhere 25 years and a world away. Later that evening, Commander Blackwood found her sweeping near the armory. The corridor was empty, quiet. "You were Desert Storm," he said. She didn't answer immediately. "I cleaned facilities during that time, Commander." "I pulled your file," he said. 20 years of service, most of it redacted. That's not normal for a maintenance tech." Wren's mop stopped mid-swipe. "Perhaps there's nothing worth recording." "Or too much they didn't want recorded," Blackwood countered softly. "There are rumors about a classified sniper program, female operators, designated Ghost Echo." Wren's knuckles whitened around the handle. "Rumors are common in the military," she said quietly. He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Whatever your past, Ms. Talovich, I need these men focused, all of them, and I need sabotage off my range. Then ensure their weapons are properly maintained, she replied, her tone clipped final. When he left, she stood alone again, the silence pressing against her like gravity. In another life, she'd have reported him, filed the paperwork, followed the chain of command. But this wasn't that kind of war anymore. The next morning, Callum's rifle performed flawlessly. Thod's grin faded one careful shot at a time. When the final round cracked downrange, Callum's grouping was cleaner than his. For the first time, Thod looked uncertain. Ren watched from the far wall, expression unreadable. No one saw her exhale. No one saw her whisper, so faint it vanished in the echo of gunfire. Balance restored. Why did he corner her when no one was watching? Maybe because bullies prefer empty hallways. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off the steel lockers lining the passage near the range. It was late, after drills, after mess. Ren was restocking her cleaning cart, stacking bottles of disinfectant and folded towels, when Thod's shadow stretched across the tiles. He approached like a predator pretending to be casual, arms folded, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. You know, he said, leaning against the wall, there's been some weird stuff happening lately. Equipment getting fixed without work orders. Scopes adjusted overnight. Somebody playing guardian angel. Ren didn't look up. Maintenance staff works around the clock. You should be grateful someone cares enough to keep your toys functional. That's the thing, he continued, his voice dropping. I think someone's playing favorites, helping certain candidates who don't deserve it. Ren turned slowly, her gray eyes locked onto his, cool and level. Are you accusing me of something, Chief Evercraftoft? He smiled, the kind of smile that hides insecurity behind teeth. Just saying, you should stick to mops and leave the rifles to professionals. Not everyone's cut out for combat. There's a natural order to these things, you understand. Some people fight, others clean up after them. He stepped closer, too close. The corridor's hum seemed to fade. Then Ren shifted just a fraction of an inch, a movement so subtle, so deeply ingrained that it changed everything. Her shoulders squared, her stance anchored. No overt threat, no weapon raised. Yet every instinct in Thod's body screamed that something had just gone wrong. He didn't know why, but he took a step back. I understand natural order perfectly well, she said softly. Better than most. Before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Problem here. Commander Blackwood rounded the corner, a clipboard in one hand, eyebrows raised. No problem, sir, Thod replied instantly, straightening. Just discussing maintenance schedules. I'm sure Miss Talovich appreciates your concern, Blackwood said, tone dry enough to cut glass. Briefing in 5 minutes, Chief. Don't be late. Thod hesitated, then left without another word. When he was gone, Blackwood lingered, studying her. You all right? Ren resumed stacking her supplies. Of course, why wouldn't I be? He smiled faintly. You know, most people would have been intimidated. I've cleaned military facilities for a long time, Commander, she said, closing the cart. Takes more than a young man with something to prove. He nodded, almost in admiration, then walked away. Ren watched him go. The echo of his boots faded, leaving her alone again. Her pulse steadied. Her breathing slowed, but her hands, just for a moment, trembled. The next morning, the firing range hummed with energy. Final qualification day. The kind of day careers were made or broken. Outside, the San Diego air was crisp, sunlight glinting off the ocean beyond the facility. Inside, the atmosphere was different, dense, charged. Senior officers had gathered, including one man whose presence changed the temperature of the room. Rear Admiral Preston. Silver-haired, scar across his chin, the kind of man whose medals outnumbered his regrets, but not by much. His arrival turned the candidates into statues. Wren stood near the wall, mop in hand, watching silently as Blackwood briefed the group. Today's precision evaluation determines final rankings and team assignments, he announced. The Admiral will be observing. Every movement in the room became sharper, tighter. The sound of bolts locking, magazines clicking into place, boots shifting. Thod exuded confidence, his posture perfect, his grin cocky. Callum moved slower, double-checking his scope, adjusting his breathing. The firing began. Rounds cracked downrange in controlled rhythm. Brass casings jumped and rolled across the floor. Officers murmured to each other, jotting notes. Preston's face gave away nothing. Wren continued cleaning, quietly collecting the discarded shells near the benches. Then during Callum's setup for the final long-range test, something changed. His hand froze on the rifle. "Sir," he said, raising his voice, "there's an issue with my scope." Thod scoffed. "Again, maybe shooting's just not your calling, Marsh." Blackwood ignored him and walked over. "What's wrong?" "The reticle's off," Callum said, "and there's a crack in the lens." A few snickers broke out among the candidates. Wren stopped mopping. She walked forward quietly, her footsteps soft but sure. "Permission to speak, Commander." Blackwood hesitated, then nodded. Wren gestured toward the weapon. "It's not user error. The forward lens is cracked. Equipment fatigue. It'll distort long-range accuracy." Thod turned, incredulous. "With respect, Commander, she's a janitor, not an armorer. Are we taking cleaning tips now?" The laughter came again, but thinner this time, edged with discomfort. Blackwood inspected the rifle himself. After a few seconds, he exhaled. "She's right." The room fell silent. He lowered the weapon. "We'll postpone the final test. Equipment integrity is compromised." "No need," Thod interrupted, forcing a grin. "We've all used the same gear. If there's damage, we can all adapt." He glanced at Wren, mischief flickering in his eyes. "Hell, maybe our resident expert would like to demonstrate." He held the rifle out toward her, mock gallant, taunting. A ripple of tension passed through the room. Even the Admiral's expression hardened. Wren looked at the weapon, then at Thod. Her voice was calm. "I wouldn't want to scratch the barrel." The words landed like a slap. Commander Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Then deliberately he said, "Actually, Chief Evercraftoft, that's not a bad idea." Thod blinked. "Sir." "Let's make this a learning moment," Blackwood said. "Miss Talovich, would you mind demonstrating correct technique?" Every head turned. Even the Admiral said nothing. Wren placed her mop aside, moving to the firing line. Her hands closed around the rifle. She checked the chamber, adjusted the stock. The transformation was immediate, subtle, but undeniable. Her posture changed. Her breathing slowed. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Without a word, she brought the weapon to her shoulder. The stance was perfect, too perfect. Thod's smirk began to fade. 3 small adjustments to the scope. Her finger rested on the trigger. She inhaled, exhaled. The shot cracked through the range like thunder. The target downrange barely shivered, but through the spotting scope, Blackwood saw what no one else yet had. Her bullet had split Thod's bullseye clean in half. Exactly in half. The room froze. Wren safed the weapon, lowered it, and handed it back to Thod, whose fingers didn't immediately close around it. "Proper breathing prevents lateral drift," she said softly. Her accent had returned, thicker now, unmasked. "You're anticipating recoil. It makes you push right." Silence. Then Admiral Preston stepped forward. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said, voice even, eyes sharp. Wren met his gaze without flinching. "No, sir, we have not." He studied her face for a long moment, as if searching memory. When he spoke again, his words fell like stones into still water. "Ghost Echo, Yugoslavia 92, Kuwait 91. A murmur rippled through the room. You were Echo. The blood drained from several faces. Wren stood motionless, but in her eyes something old and dangerous woke. I thought all Ghost Echo personnel were classified until 2040, the Admiral continued quietly. They are, sir, she replied, which is why I'm merely a maintenance technician. Thodd's mouth opened, then closed again. Admiral Preston looked to the others. Gentlemen, before you stands one of only 6 women to qualify for the Ghost Echo Sniper program, the most precise unit this Navy ever buried. 36 confirmed operations, 0 civilian casualties, no official record. No one moved, no one breathed. Blackwood looked almost reverent. I suspected, he murmured, but not this. Wren's expression softened, almost regretful. I chose to serve where I could when they wouldn't let me serve how I should. She glanced toward Thodd, not with anger but clarity. Sometimes the most important work happens where no one's looking. Preston reached into his pocket, withdrawing a dull silver medal, its surface worn smooth by years. Chief Petty Officer Talovich, he said formally, placing it in her palm. You were recommended for the Silver Star 3 times. This was finally approved when Ghost Echo was declassified internally. She stared at the medal, at the faint reflection of her own lined face. The seals shifted, standing straighter. Respect was no longer optional. Even Thodd, his jaw tight, stood at attention. Wren closed her hand around the medal and looked up. Then let's get back to work, she said. There's still a scope to fix. She turned toward Callum's rifle, inspecting it briefly. It's not the glass, she said. Mounting rings loose, quarter turn, easy to miss unless you know what you're looking for. Her fingers tightened the adjustment, then handed it to Thodd. Try now. Thodd swallowed hard. Thank you, Chief. Her tone was even. You're welcome, Chief Evercraftoft. She picked up her mop again. The motion was the same as before, quiet, steady, unassuming, but now everyone watched. And for the first time in a long time, the janitor's silence wasn't invisibility. It was command. As the officers dispersed, Admiral Preston lingered. Walk with me, he said, not an order, a request between equals. They stepped out into the sunlight filtering through high windows. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the Admiral said softly, Isla Reeves. Wren stopped walking. That name hadn't existed for 20 years. That person no longer exists, sir. So I see, Preston said. You could have taken a desk job, civilian contract, but you chose this. Wren looked down at the mop handle in her hand. I prefer honest work. It leaves fewer stains. Preston smiled faintly. The program was a mistake the way it ended, politics over performance. Ancient history, she said, but her tone betrayed a hairline crack in the armor. Not anymore, he replied, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Your record being reviewed. They're considering full recognition for Ghost Echo. She didn't take it right away, 25 years too late. Yes, he admitted, but maybe not without meaning. After a pause, she accepted the envelope, without opening it. Is that why you're here, sir? She asked. To find me. Partly, Preston said. I didn't expect to find you mopping floors. I requested the post, she said simply. Admin work meant paperwork. This lets me see everything, hear everything, be invisible again. He nodded slowly. Old habits. Old ghosts, she corrected. They walked a little further before his voice dropped. The others from your team. She shook her head. Scattered, one in Seattle, one back in Ukraine. The rest, ghosts fade with time. Preston's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Maybe not all of them. Wren looked up sharply, but before she could ask, Blackwood appeared from the hallway, apologetic but urgent. Sir, candidates are reassembled. We're ready to resume qualifications. Preston nodded. Of course. He turned to Wren. We'll continue this later, Chief Talovich. Yes, sir. As they re-entered the range, the light caught her medal, glinting faintly through the fabric of her coveralls. For years she had been erased, a legend hidden behind bleach and buckets, but today the ghosts had stirred. And somewhere deep down, Ren Talovich knew this wasn't over, not even close. What did the boy really know? That question followed Ren, long after the range had gone quiet. Night fell over the training compound like a blanket pulled tight. The sound of distant surf rolled in through the half-open windows of the janitor's office. Ren sat alone at her small metal desk, the same envelope Admiral Preston had given her lying unopened beside a steaming mug of tea. She hadn't touched it, couldn't. The fluorescent light above her buzzed faintly, drawing soft shadows across the concrete walls, the kind of silence only found in places built for noise. She turned the metal in her hand, its weight unfamiliar. Recognition was supposed to feel like justice. Instead, it felt like a burden she'd already buried once. Outside, a faint knock echoed. "Come in," she said, not looking up. Callum Marsh stepped into the room, hesitant but purposeful. His uniform still carried the day's dust, his face streaked faintly with oil and pride. He held something wrapped in a cloth. "Evening, ma'am," he said. Ren didn't correct him. "Commander said you might still be here," he continued. "I wanted too well to thank you properly." "For what?" "For everything that happened today. You could have stayed quiet. Let them think what they wanted, but you stood up. You didn't have to." Ren gave a faint smile. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," he said, "but it mattered to me anyway." He placed the cloth on her desk and unfolded it. Inside was a rifle magazine, polished clean, brass rounds lined perfectly. On the side, etched in small letters, were the words, "Honor the unseen." Ren looked at it for a long moment. "You did this." He nodded. "Figured someone should remember what you did today." She exhaled softly, not from sentiment but from something deeper, recognition. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "My grandmother," Callum asked with a small knowing smile. Ren's gaze lifted, sharp. "Why would you say that?" "Because you looked at that coin like it hurt," he said, "like it used to mean something." For the first time, Ren leaned back, studying him not as a student but as a reflection. "Your grandmother, Adeline Marrow, she ever tell you where she served before Desert Storm?" Callum frowned. "Bits and pieces, some story about a covert NATO unit. She said it was all scrubbed. I thought she was exaggerating." Ren shook her head slowly. "She wasn't. Ghost Echo wasn't NATO, not officially, but we answered to them when it suited command." His eyes widened. "You knew her?" Ren's voice softened. "We were deployed together once, Kosovo. She saved my life twice." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air was heavy with the kind of silence that only truth can bring. "She was my family," Callum said finally. "I never met anyone who knew her before." Ren's expression softened. "She was the best of us." Callum hesitated, then asked, "Why did they erase you all?" Ren turned her gaze to the window, watching the moonlight shimmer across the dark water. "Because we did what politics wouldn't allow. Ghost Echo wasn't supposed to exist. We went where diplomats couldn't. We ended wars before they began, or so we thought." She looked back at him, eyes shadowed. "But every bullet we fired bought silence, and silence has a price." Callum swallowed. "You mean?" "I mean some of us stopped believing we were on the right side," she interrupted softly. "When orders come from ghosts, morality gets blurry." A faint alarm sounded somewhere distant, base curfew. "You should go," she said. "Long day tomorrow." Callum hesitated. "Are you coming to the range?" Ren gave a small, dry smile. "Always do. Floors don't clean themselves." He lingered, then nodded and stepped out, leaving the faint scent of gun oil and youth behind him. When the door closed, Ren stared at the envelope again. Slowly, she tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper, stamped "Confidential Operation Stillwater Declassification Notice." Her breath caught. Still water. The word felt like a wound reopening. She read the lines, each one heavier than the last. Recovered intel suggests surviving Ghost Echo operators may still be subject to prosecution under revised war ethics statutes, pending reassessment by Defense Review Board. Her eyes darkened. "They're not done burying us," she whispered. The next morning the range felt colder. Overcast sky. The sea mist rolled in heavy and low, coating everything with a dull sheen. Wren moved quietly through the armory, checking inventory, but her mind was miles away. Callum was already there, adjusting targets with another trainee. When he saw her, he gave a small nod. Thod was back too, quieter than usual, but his pride still burned like a pilot light behind his eyes. Blackwood called the room to attention. "Listen up. Tomorrow's the tactical field exercise. You'll be split into 2 fire teams. Standard ops simulation, recon, marksmanship, recovery. But there's a change." He looked to Wren. "Chief Talovich will serve as field observer." The room rustled. Even Thod's composure cracked. "Sir, with respect, a janitor." Blackwood's expression didn't change. "A former Ghost Echo sniper," he said flatly. "You'll treat her as your senior advisor. Her word in the field is final." Thod's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Wren's tone was calm. "I'll observe, nothing more." The teams assembled gear, each man suddenly sharper, quieter. Wren watched as Callum checked his rifle carefully, methodically, the way she once did before missions that never made the news. When they departed at dawn the next day, the Pacific wind bit cold across the desert training ground. Dust devils twisted between dunes as they moved toward the target zone, a simulated hostile camp nestled between rock ridges. Wren followed behind the formation, her steps silent, every motion efficient. She hadn't worn a tactical harness in years, but the weight felt familiar, comforting even. The operation started smoothly, until the radio crackled with static. "Alpha Team, report position." Blackwood's voice came through. Thod replied, "Advancing on Ridge 2, visual on mock targets." "Copy, proceed with caution." Wren crouched beside Callum, scanning the horizon. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Too quiet," she murmured. "Even simulations have rhythm, this feels staged." A sound, faint, metallic, echoed from the far ridge. She froze. "Down," she hissed. A second later, the air exploded. Paint-round simulation fire rained down, splattering sand and fabric. The opposing team had set an ambush. Thod swore, diving for cover. Callum rolled behind a boulder, returning controlled bursts. Wren's voice was calm, cutting through chaos like a scalpel. "2 shooters high left, 1 flanking low. Control your fire." Callum adjusted, exhaled, squeezed. 2 clean hits. The flanking silhouette dropped, marked neutralized by sensors. When the dust settled, Alpha Team held the ground. Thod's pride was bruised, but his men were intact. Wren rose slowly, scanning the horizon. The silence returned, but it wasn't calm, it was waiting. Then her radio chirped softly. Not Blackwood, not base comms, a different channel, one she hadn't heard in decades. "Echo 4, the voice said. "Do you copy?" Her breath froze. "Repeat," the voice said again. "Echo 4, Stillwater, not over." Wren's pulse quickened. She looked around, no one else had heard. The others were checking gear, unaware. She pressed a hand to the earpiece, whispering, "Identify yourself." Static then. "You shouldn't have surfaced, Isla, they're cleaning house." Then silence. She stood there for a long moment, the sound of the ocean wind cutting across the range. "Everything okay?" Callum asked, noticing her stillness. Wren blinked once, forcing calm. "Fine, just interference." But inside, the calm was gone. Ghost Echo wasn't buried after all. Someone was still out there, and someone wanted her gone. That night she returned to her quarters and locked the door. From beneath a false panel in her duffel, she pulled out an old encrypted radio, analog, military-grade, scarred with age. She turned it on. The hum filled the room. For a moment nothing, then faintly a voice. Echo 1 reporting, Talovich, is that you? Wren closed her eyes. That name, that voice should have been impossible. Echo 1, she whispered. Alive and moving, the voice replied. But they're coming. Stillwater wasn't a clean-up op. It was a cover-up. They're erasing everyone left from Echo. Wren's hands tightened. Who's they? The same people who gave us the orders. Static swallowed the rest. She sat in the dark, the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. Outside, the waves rolled in relentless rhythm, steady, merciless. Callum's grandmother had once told her, there's no such thing as a clean shot, only a quiet consequence. Now those consequences were back. Wren Talovich, the janitor of the firing range, was no longer invisible. And the ghosts she'd buried were finally knocking. Why did she hear footsteps when no one was supposed to be there? The base was asleep. Or at least it should have been. Wren moved silently through the maintenance corridor, the low hum of generators pulsing beneath her feet. Her mop bucket squeaked softly, echoing down the empty hall, the same hall she'd walked for 2 years without incident. But tonight, something was different. It wasn't the silence that bothered her, it was the weight in it. Every instinct, old, buried deep, told her she was being watched. She reached the end of the corridor and paused beside the storage door. Her hand hovered near the latch, but she didn't open it immediately. The faintest scuff of a boot came from the shadows behind her. She turned quick, precise. Nothing, just the long hallway dimly lit, air thick with the smell of solvent. Her pulse slowed, but only because she forced it to. She learned long ago that fear was a tool, panic was death. She pushed open the door, slipped inside and locked it behind her. The storage room was small, a mix of cleaning supplies and forgotten equipment. She set down her bucket, moved to the far wall, and pulled away a false panel hidden behind stacked boxes. Inside was a metal case, rusted, locked. She twisted the latch and opened it. Her old M24 lay inside, the same rifle she hadn't touched since Yugoslavia. She'd kept it hidden under the radar of every inspection, every audit, because some ghosts deserve to sleep armed. She ran her hands across the weapon, the cool steel, the faint scars on the stock. It wasn't nostalgia, it was readiness. Then she heard it again. This time closer. A faint metallic click, like the safety of a sidearm disengaging. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She dove behind a crate as the first suppressed shot cracked through the air, shattering the mop bucket where she just stood. Shards of plastic flew across the floor. 2 shooters, maybe 3. Small arms, silencers, professional. They'd found her. She grabbed the M24, slammed a round into the chamber, and drew a breath that felt like memory, the kind of breath taken before history repeats itself. The next shot she fired wasn't for practice, it was survival. The bullet punched through the first intruder's chest, throwing him backward into the corridor. The others retreated, returning fire in short bursts. Wren rolled across the floor, calculating distances, counting the echo of each shot. Her movements were deliberate muscle memory from a life she'd pretended to forget. When the silence returned, only the wind moved through the shattered window. She approached the fallen man. No insignia, no tags, just matte black gear, suppressed pistol, and a small patch stitched onto his sleeve, a circle divided by 3 jagged lines. Stillwater's mark. Her stomach turned. She knelt, pried open the man's radio, and twisted the frequency dial. Static, then a voice. Target neutralized. She didn't answer, just listened. Command, confirm extraction team inbound. The janitor's cover is blown. The voice was calm, efficient, government calm. Wren switched the radio off and stood there for a long moment. the sound of her own breathing loud in the quiet. They weren't just after her. They were cleaning house, for real this time. At dawn, she was already scrubbing blood off the tiles before anyone else arrived. When Commander Blackwood entered the range that morning, he paused at the faint scent of bleach. "You're in early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," Wren replied simply. He noticed the small cut on her cheek, the torn edge of her sleeve, but didn't press. "Admiral Preston's requesting another meeting," he said. "Something about updated intel." Wren nodded. "I'll be there." After he left, she finished mopping the last streak of red that refused to fade. By the time the briefing began, the entire team was on edge. Preston stood at the front of the room, expression grave. A satellite image was projected on the wall, an old facility in the Nevada desert, half buried by sand. "Fort Stillwater," he said, "decommissioned 20 years ago. Originally listed as a testing site, but our latest recon suggests it's active again." Callum frowned. "Active by who?" "That's the question," Preston said. 2 days ago, an encrypted transmission pinged from the area using legacy ghost echo frequencies. Wren's stomach clenched. Preston continued. "Whoever's behind it knows the old codes. That means one of your former operatives might still be alive, Chief Talovich." Her eyes lifted slowly. "Or compromised." The room was silent. Blackwood crossed his arms. "You think this is connected to the attempted infiltration last night?" Wren's gaze sharpened. "What infiltration?" The Admiral hesitated. "We found 2 unidentified bodies near the perimeter before dawn, killed with precision shots." She said nothing. Her hands remained steady at her sides. "Base is on lockdown," Preston said, "until we confirm whether this is an inside job." Thod muttered. "Guess cleaning duty got dangerous overnight." Wren ignored him. Preston gestured to the map. "Chief, I'm reinstating your clearance. You'll accompany the investigation team to Stillwater. You know its layout better than anyone left alive." Wren's reply was immediate. "I'll go, but not under Navy command." Preston frowned. "You'll follow orders." "I'll follow my conscience," she said quietly. The room shifted, tension thick as storm air. Callum spoke up. "Sir, if she goes, I volunteer." Everyone turned to him. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "You barely qualified last week." "Then I'll learn fast," Callum said. "If Ghost Echo's being hunted, someone needs to have her back." Preston studied him, then nodded. "Fine, you're attached as observer." Wren glanced at the young man, not approval, not rejection, something closer to recognition. That night they left under heavy clouds. A single helicopter cut through the darkness, blades slicing air that smelled like rain. Wren sat near the open hatch, wind whipping her hair loose from its tie. Below, the desert stretched endless, featureless, and silent. Callum sat across from her, rifle resting on his knees. He looked at her the way rookies always look at veterans, half awe, half fear. "You ever go back to the same battlefield twice?" he asked over the noise. Wren's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Only if the first time didn't finish what it started." They touched down miles from the site under cover of night. No lights, no noise, just the distant hum of static in their comms. The ruins of Fort Stillwater rose from the sand like bones. Crumbling concrete, twisted fencing, antennae rusted by years of disuse. But beneath the decay, something still lived, a faint vibration, a pulse of machinery underground. Callum crouched beside her, whispering, "Feels wrong, like it's breathing." Wren nodded. "That's because it is." They moved quietly toward the entrance. Inside, dust clung to their boots, the air heavy with the smell of old fuel. Broken screens lined the walls. But someone had been here recently, footprints in the dust, power cables still warm. They descended deeper into the bunker. The flicker of red emergency lights cast shadows that moved when nothing else did. At the lowest level, they reached a sealed blast door. Faded stenciling read, Project Stillwater, authorized personnel only. Wren placed her palm on the metal. It vibrated faintly like a pulse. "Stand back," she whispered. A few seconds later, the door unlocked with a hiss. Inside, rows of computer terminals, servers humming softly, and a central display still active. On the screen, lines of data streamed, faces, dossiers, names, hers among them. Ghost Echo, status reactivation pending. Callum exhaled. "What the hell is this?" Wren's voice was cold, a resurrection. The console beeped. A new line appeared. Subject LOCATED, Wren TALIVICH, engage protocol. Alarms blared. Automatic turrets unfolded from the ceiling with a mechanical shriek. Wren shoved Callum aside as the first burst tore through the air. Sparks flew, concrete splintered. She dove behind a terminal, returning fire with surgical precision. Each shot found its mark, one turret, then another. Callum's hands trembled as he reloaded. This place is still operational. Someone's controlling it remotely. Wren glanced at the monitor, where a camera feed flickered to life. A figure in a dark uniform watched them from somewhere else, expression hidden, voice distorted through speakers. "Hello, Isla," the voice said. "You should have stayed dead." Wren's heart went still. That voice. "Echo 1," she whispered. "Not anymore," the voice replied. "They offered me survival, I took it." Callum stared at her. "That's your old team leader." She nodded slowly. "Used to be." "Why would he?" "Because Stillwater wasn't meant to end," she cut him off. "It was meant to evolve." The figure's voice deepened. "You left the program, Talovich. You ran. Now they're cleaning what's left of the mess you made." Wren stood defiant. "If this is survival, you should have stayed buried." The speaker crackled with laughter. "You can't bury an idea, Isla. You can only feed it, and you've just stepped into its stomach." A metallic click echoed behind them, more machines powering on. Wren looked to Callum. "We move now." They sprinted toward the upper levels as the hallway exploded behind them, fire lighting the corridor in pulses of orange and white. By the time they reached the surface, the night sky had turned red with the glow of distant detonation. The helicopter that brought them was gone. Callum panted, scanning the horizon. "They knew we were coming." Wren stared back at the burning facility. "They wanted witnesses." "To what?" he asked. She didn't answer. Because the truth was worse than either of them could yet imagine. How long can two ghosts outrun a machine built to erase them? The desert wind clawed at their faces as Wren and Callum stumbled away from the burning ruins of Fort Stillwater. The facility behind them glowed like a dying star, fire consuming the sand, throwing waves of heat into the cold night. Every explosion was a heartbeat from another life. Wren's hands shook from adrenaline and exhaustion, but she didn't slow. The rifle slung across her back was warm to the touch, not from firing, but from the memory of use. "Keep moving," she said, voice hoarse. Callum followed close behind, his breathing ragged. "We're heading nowhere. There's no evac, no signal." "Good," she replied. "Means they can't track us through comms." The desert stretched out before them, endless black dunes under a pale, fractured moon. In the distance, the echo of rotor blades began to rise. Callum looked up, panic in his eyes. "They sent drones." Wren stopped. Her silhouette turned against the glow of the flames. "Not drones," she said quietly. "Those are sweep teams." He frowned. "How do you know?" "Because I used to lead them." The sound grew louder, rhythmic, mechanical, deliberate. Searchlights began to cut through the haze, scanning the terrain like the eyes of something ancient and patient. Wren crouched low, motioning for Callum to follow. They slid into a shallow ravine carved by an old flood channel. The air down there was cold and still. Callum pressed his back to the dirt wall, whispering, They'll find us. Ren checked her rifle, eyes scanning the dark. Not if you stay quiet. A beam of white light swept across the ridge above them. Ren froze, hand tightening around the stock. The light lingered for a moment, then moved on. For a brief second, she closed her eyes. The smell of dust and smoke carried her back, a different desert, different war. The sound of foreign voices, the smell of burning oil. And her team, 5 women who disappeared from the record books but not from her memory. Echo 1, Echo 2, Echo 4 herself. Now only she remained. Callum's voice broke through her thoughts. What was Stillwater, really? Ren didn't answer immediately. The words came slowly, like something forced from a locked room. It started as a counterinsurgency project, behavioral mapping. They wanted to build soldiers who could predict conflict before it began. Ghost Echo was the field test. We weren't just snipers, we were observers. They studied our instincts, every choice we made. He frowned, studied. They monitored our fear responses, how long it took to pull a trigger, what guilt did to aim. Her jaw clenched. When the data came back, they realized it wasn't about combat skill. It was about conscience. The best shots weren't the fastest. They were the ones who hesitated, who felt. Callum stared at her. So you were the control group. We were the experiment, she corrected softly. They learned how to manufacture empathy or remove it. Silence, only the sound of wind moving across sand. After a moment, Callum whispered, "Why you? Why bring you back now?" Ren's eyes narrowed toward the burning horizon. Because I broke their model. I refused a kill order in Sarajevo. Saved a civilian asset instead of eliminating him. They shut us down within weeks. She looked at him. But I was the only one who didn't disappear. Maybe they kept me alive for cleanup. Maybe for study. He shook his head. That's not survival, that's imprisonment. Ren gave a faint, bitter smile. Sometimes there's no difference. Above them, the sound of rotors faded, for now. They crawled deeper into the ravine, following it until it curved toward a dry riverbed. The first light of dawn began to edge over the horizon, a pale blue smudge against the dark. When they finally stopped, Callum collapsed onto the sand, gasping. How far do we go? Far enough, Ren said, then quiet enough. He laughed weakly. You talk like someone who's done this before. I've done nothing else, she replied. The silence between them stretched, heavy but not hostile. Callum finally looked at her, really looked. The streaks of dirt across her face, the gray in her hair, the stillness in her eyes. Not age. Wait. You don't sleep much, do you? He asked. Sleep's for people with nothing left to remember. He hesitated, then said softly, You saved me back there, in the bunker. I saved everyone, she said. But you chose me. Her gaze shifted, unreadable. You remind me of the reason I stopped obeying orders. She stood, scanning the horizon. In the distance, something shimmered, heat or metal. She couldn't tell. Then faintly, a sound she recognized too well, static on a secure frequency. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the fallen intruder's radio. It was still on. A voice spoke through it, calm, clinical. Target Echo 4 presumed mobile. Activate ground team. Ren switched channels. This is Echo 4, whose command? Static, then a different voice, feminine, steady. Isla. Ren froze. It wasn't possible. That voice belonged to someone long dead. Echo 3, she whispered. I told you they'd come for us, the voice replied. We don't have long. I'm at grid 39, sector D, bring the boy. The transmission cut off. Ren stared at the radio, heart pounding. Callum frowned. Who was that? Someone who shouldn't be alive. She began packing her gear. We move now. They walked for hours, the sun rising behind them, turning the desert into a blinding expanse of gold and heat. By midday, they reached what looked like an abandoned relay station, a skeletal tower leaning over cracked concrete. Ren approached first, weapon raised. Stay behind me. The door creaked open. Inside it was dark and cool, walls covered in peeling paint and old maps. Then she saw her. A woman, older, weathered, one arm replaced with a prosthetic of crude metal and carbon fiber. Her uniform was patched, nameless, but the eyes, those were the same. Echo 3, Ren said softly. The woman smiled faintly. Took you long enough, Isla. They embraced, not gently, but like people who know time is running out. I thought you were dead, Ren said. Close enough, Echo 3 replied. Stillwater sent hunters after me 3 years ago. I've been underground since. She looked at Callum. He's Marrow's grandson, isn't he? Callum blinked. You knew my grandmother too. Echo 3 nodded. She was the conscience of the unit. Without her, none of us would have survived. Ren sat down heavily, wiping sweat from her forehead. Stillwater's alive. They rebuilt it under the Department of Defense. Different name, same intent. Data harvesting through combat AI. Echo 3 nodded grimly. They're weaponizing empathy, turning what made us human into code. Callum stared at both women. So this isn't just about you, it's about everything you stood for. Ren met his gaze. No, it's about what we lost for standing. Echo 3 opened a rusted metal case on the table. Inside were files, flash drives, documents marked Stillwater REDACTED. This is proof, she said. Every experiment, every name, we can expose them, but we need access to their uplink still located on the base you cleaned. Ren nodded slowly. The firing range. Callum blinked. You mean the same Navy base? Exactly, Echo 3 said. It's built over their transmission hub. They've been hiding in plain sight. Ren exhaled. Perfect place to watch who passes through. A sudden noise outside made them all freeze. The crunch of boots on gravel. Ren gestured to the others. Silent hand signals, old habits. The door creaked. A shadow moved across the floor. Callum raised his rifle, but Ren motioned him down. She waited until the figure stepped into view, and then recognition hit like a hammer. Commander Blackwood. His face was drawn, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. He raised his hand slowly. Easy, I'm not your enemy. Ren didn't lower her aim. Prove it. I know about Stillwater, he said. Preston, been compromised. They're pulling data from the range, your biometric scans, weapon analysis, even Callum's marksmanship reports. They've been feeding the algorithm. Ren's eyes darkened. You followed us here. I followed the trail of bodies, he said grimly. You two are the last ones left who can stop this. Echo 3 looked between them. He's telling the truth. Ren's finger hovered on the trigger. How do you know? Because I've been listening, Echo 3 said. Stillwater's using him as bait. Blackwood stepped forward slowly. You don't have to trust me, just look at this. He tossed a tablet onto the table. On the screen, a live feed of the base firing range. Engineers moving equipment. Massive antennas rising from the ground. Ren stared. They're activating it. Blackwood nodded. At midnight. Once the system's online, every piece of combat data collected in the last 30 years gets integrated. Every moral hesitation, every kill pattern, you, her, everyone. Echo 3's voice was low. They'll erase humanity from the algorithm. Ren closed her eyes. The sound of rotor blades echoed faintly in the distance again. She opened them slowly. Then we end it tonight. Callum swallowed. End it how? Ren met his gaze. By burning the range to the ground. The wind outside howled like an omen. They all knew what that meant, not a mission, a reckoning. And as the sun sank behind the desert, turning the sky to blood and shadow, Ren Talovich, the janitor, the ghost, the soldier who never stopped cleaning up after others, prepared to scrub one last stain from history. Why did the night feel like it was holding its breath? The horizon was a thin line of dying gold when Ren, Callum, and Echo 3 began their march back toward the base. The desert stretched out before them, A black sea under a bruised sky, every dune whispering the same question. How far will you go to erase what you built? Ren's pack was light, stripped of everything except ammunition, a silencer, and the data drives Echo 3 carried. Her body moved with mechanical precision, but her mind was a storm. Each step toward the base felt like walking into a confession. Behind her, Callum adjusted his rifle sling, whispering, "You think Commander Blackwood will meet us inside?" Ren didn't slow, if he's still breathing. "And Preston." She glanced toward the dark horizon. "He'll be waiting. Men like him always are when there's something left to defend, even if it's wrong." Echo 3 walked slightly ahead, prosthetic hand gripping the map tablet, its faint blue glow illuminating her scarred face. "Access tunnels still under the old drainage trench," she said. "If they've reactivated the uplink, that's our way in." "Any idea how many guards?" Callum asked. "Enough," Ren said, "but not enough to stop us." They reached the trench just after midnight. The air smelled of salt and steel. From above, the base shimmered, no longer quiet and gray but alive with lights, generators, movement. Trucks moved along the tarmac. The firing range was now a construction site of antennas, cables, and scaffolding. Ren crouched, scanning through her scope. "They've accelerated the build." Echo 3's voice was grim. "Means Preston's scared. He knows we're coming." The access hatch was half buried under sand. Ren brushed it clean, twisted the rusted wheel, and opened it with a low groan of metal. The air that escaped was cold, the recycled breath of machines. They dropped down one by one. The narrow tunnel led beneath the perimeter fence, past corroded pipes and forgotten wiring. Every drip of condensation echoed like a heartbeat. Halfway through, Callum whispered, "Why not just leak the data? The world deserves to know." Ren's voice was low. "Because if we release it, someone will use it. They always do." "So what's the plan then?" "Destroy it," Echo 3 said. "Every drive, every terminal, in the line." Callum hesitated. "That's erasing history." Ren looked back over her shoulder, eyes like steel. "Sometimes mercy wears that face." They emerged into the lower maintenance bay of the base, quiet, sterile, humming with faint electric life. The smell of disinfectant stung the air, the same brand Ren used every day for years. Home and battlefield. The irony almost made her smile. "Stay low," she whispered. "Security will sweep the upper corridors every 15 minutes." They moved like shadows. Ren knew every blind spot, every camera angle. She cleaned these floors so long she could walk them blindfolded. They passed the locker room, empty now, lights flickering. The echo of laughter from months before lingered in memory, like ghosts pretending to be alive. Callum paused near the shooting lanes. "This place feels different." "It is," Ren said. "It's awake." Through the observation glass, they could see it, the range transformed. The firing stations were lined with servers, cables running like veins into a central console. And in the middle stood Admiral Preston, flanked by 2 armed guards and Commander Blackwood. Ren's breath caught. Blackwood's expression was unreadable. Preston's coldly determined. "Time to end this," Echo 3 murmured, loading her sidearm. Ren stopped her. "No killing unless we have to. They may still be under control." They crept closer, slipping through the maintenance passage until they reached the control room above the range floor. From there, they had a full view of the operation. Preston was speaking into a headset. "Initiate sequence. Begin data integration. Ghost Echo's template remains the optimal model. Conscience weighted at 30%. Predictable hesitation yields adaptable behavior." Callum's face went pale. "He's using you, all of you, as code." Ren stared through the glass. "Not just us. Every soldier who's ever hesitated before pulling the trigger. He's digitizing guilt." Preston turned toward Blackwood. Once it's live, we'll have a combat system that mimics empathy but never feels it. The perfect soldier. Blackwood's jaw tightened. You're erasing what makes them human. Preston's tone sharpened. Humanity doesn't win wars, consistency does. That was when Wren decided. She stood, chambered around, and whispered, "We're not letting this happen." Echo 3 nodded. "Fuse room beneath the server hub. You set charges, I'll plant the disruptor." "Callum," Wren said, turning to him, "you guard the exit. If anyone gets past us, you end it." He hesitated. "You're asking me to kill our own." "I'm asking you to protect something bigger." He looked at her, understanding dawning behind fear. "Your conscience," he said quietly. Wren's voice was steady. "No, yours." They moved. Down the stairwell, through the hum of servers, the air thick with heat and electricity. Wren reached the fuse compartment, rows of circuit panels glowing faint blue. She unslung her pack, pulling out thermite charges, attaching them one by one. Each hissed faintly as it armed. Above them, Preston's voice echoed through intercoms. "Power stabilization at 78%. Begin memory synchronization." Echo 3 worked the disruptor console, fingers moving fast. Almost there. Then footsteps. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. Wren froze. Echo 3's hand twitched toward her sidearm, but Wren stopped her. "Don't," she said softly. Blackwood looked at her, eyes full of conflict. "You shouldn't have come back." "You told us to finish it," she said. "This is how." "You think burning this place will stop them?" His voice cracked, almost pleading. "You destroy the data, they'll rebuild it. But if we keep it, we can control it. We can teach the system right from wrong." Wren stepped closer. "You can't program morality." "Then humanity dies anyway," he said. Their eyes locked, two soldiers carrying the same weight in opposite directions. Behind them, Echo 3 whispered urgently, "We're out of time." Preston's voice rang through the speakers again. "Final synchronization in 10 seconds." Blackwood raised his weapon. "Wren, don't do this." She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment saw the man he might have been before all the compromise. Then she whispered, "You told me once you needed your men focused. I finally understand." She squeezed the trigger. The shot hit him in the shoulder, not lethal, but enough to drop him. He fell back, shock and pain flashing across his face, but his expression wasn't anger. It was relief. Wren turned to Echo 3. "Now." Echo 3 slammed the disruptor. The lights flickered, alarms screamed, the floor shook as the thermite burned through the conduits. Fire spread like veins of molten light, crawling up the walls. Preston's shouting filled the intercom. "What have you done? Shut it down." Wren and Echo 3 ran, Callum covering their retreat. The first explosion tore through the range floor, blowing open glass and steel. They burst into the open air just as the central antenna erupted, a column of fire lighting the night. The concussion threw them to the ground. Callum coughed, disoriented. "You said no one dies." Wren pushed herself up, grimacing. "I said if we have to." Through the smoke, Preston stumbled from the wreckage, uniform torn, eyes wild. "You destroyed it," he screamed. "Decades of work." Wren leveled her rifle at him. "You destroyed something else first." Preston laughed, broken, hysterical. "You think you can erase Stillwater? The code's already uploaded. Every satellite, every AI platform, it's in all of them now. You didn't stop it. You spread it." Her finger froze on the trigger. Echo 3's face went pale. "He's telling the truth. The network synced before the power surge." Wren lowered the weapon slowly, the realization sinking in like a knife. They hadn't stopped the monster, they'd set it free. Preston collapsed to his knees, coughing, smoke curling around him. "You've just made conscience eternal," he said bitterly. "A ghost that never sleeps." Wren turned away, her voice quiet. "Then let it haunt them." The base burned behind them, flames licking the sky, sirens wailing in the distance. By the time reinforcements arrived, Ren and the others were gone, vanished into the desert's dark horizon. They camped miles away, the glow still visible on the horizon. Echo 3 tended to her wounds in silence. Callum sat beside Ren, watching the firelight dance across her face. He finally said, "So what now?" Ren stared into the flames. "Now it lives without us, and maybe that's the point." He frowned. "You mean the code?" She shook her head. "No, the choice, the hesitation, the part they couldn't delete." Callum looked down at his hands. "Will they come for us again?" "Eventually," she said. "But by then, maybe they'll understand what they created." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "And what about you?" Ren smiled faintly, the kind that hides a lifetime. "I'll go back to cleaning floors. Someone has to." He laughed softly, disbelief and admiration mixing in his voice. "After all that." Her eyes softened, especially after all that. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to rise, thin, fragile but real. Ren watched it quietly. Sometimes the only victory left is dignity. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. How do you live when the war doesn't end? It just gets quiet. Weeks passed, maybe months. The desert didn't count days, and neither did Ren anymore. The world she once served had moved on. The Navy labeled the Stillwater explosion an equipment malfunction during classified testing. No mention of the fire, or the erased data, or the bodies buried under molten concrete. No mention of Ghost Echo. History had been rewritten again. Ren and Callum drifted south, avoiding cities. They found shelter in an abandoned ranger station outside Yuma, Arizona, a small, crumbling building swallowed by sand and silence. Echo 3 had left after the second week, her prosthetic arm damaged beyond repair. She'd gone east, chasing rumors of another survivor. They never said goodbye. Soldiers rarely do. Now it was just Ren and Callum, 2 generations of ghosts, trying to remember how to live. Ren kept the same habits, up before dawn, cleaning the small space, boiling coffee on a rusted camp stove. Her movements were methodical, not ritualistic, survival in routine. Callum would watch her from the doorway, rifle slung across his shoulder, scanning the horizon like someone waiting for an enemy that might also be salvation. He finally asked one morning, "Do you ever get tired of being invisible?" Ren paused mid-motion, wiping the dust off the window pane. "Invisibility is a shield. People don't fear what they don't see." "That's not living," he said. She gave him a faint smile. "Neither is being hunted." Outside, the wind howled across the desert flats, an endless, unbroken sound, like the earth whispering the names of those who used to matter. At night, they'd light a small fire, careful not to let the smoke rise too high. They'd sit across from each other in the flickering glow, sharing stories the way soldiers share ammunition sparingly, but meaning every round. Callum told her about his grandmother, about how Adeline Merrow used to sit by the window after storms and polish her metals until her hands shook. She said they weren't for her, he recalled. She said they were for the ones who didn't come home. Ren listened, her gaze distant. She was right, metals don't honor survival, they apologize for it. He looked at her carefully. "You sound like someone who never forgave herself." She poked the fire with a stick. "Forgiveness is for people who stopped fighting. I never did." The desert was merciless, days of heat, nights of cold. They scavenged supplies from old service depots, lived light. Every few weeks, they'd hear the buzz of drones overhead, silent scouts in the dark. Stillwater's ghosts hadn't forgotten. But they hadn't found them either. One afternoon, Callum returned from a scavenging run, his boots coated in dust, holding a crumpled newspaper he'd found in an abandoned diner. "Front page," he said, handing it to her. Ren unfolded it carefully. The headline read, "AI Defense Network temporarily suspended after moral instability. detected in targeting systems. Her eyes traced the word slowly. According to the article, a classified combat AI had begun refusing lethal commands, citing ethical incongruities. Military analysts called it a malfunction. Engineers called it a mystery. Wren called it something else. Conscience, she whispered. Callum grinned. Looks like Stillwater's ghosts are haunting the system after all. Wren exhaled through her nose, half relief, half sorrow. They digitized empathy and it infected the machine. Good. He leaned back, stretching. So maybe we did something right. She shook her head. We didn't do right. We reminded the world what right looked like. They fell silent again. That night the sky turned silver with moonlight. The firelight flickered against Wren's face, revealing every line, every scar, each one a map of decisions that couldn't be undone. She sat alone for a long time after Callum fell asleep, watching the stars with an expression that wasn't quite peace, but wasn't pain either. Then she heard it, a faint static from the old radio on the table. Her heart skipped. She turned the dial slowly. Echo 4. The voice was weak, distorted, but she recognized it instantly. Echo 3, she whispered. Static, then again. Stillwater isn't gone. You burned the hardware but not the handlers. They're rebuilding, decentralized now, hidden in plain sight. Wren's eyes closed. Of course, they never stop. The voice faded, leaving only a whisper of white noise. She turned off the radio and sat in silence, the old ache returning. In the morning, she packed her bag. Callum woke to the sound of zippers. Where are you going? Back west, she said, to finish it. He sat up. You can't go alone. I have to. Why? She paused, looking at him, a young soldier, not yet broken, not yet erased. Because you still have a life to waste properly. That's not fair, he said. War never is. He stood, blocking the door. You taught me to see, to hesitate, to feel. You think I can just turn that off now? Wren smiled faintly. Then you're already better than I ever was. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Callum reached into his pocket and pulled out the challenge coin, the one from his grandmother. He placed it in her hand. You'll need her luck more than I do. Wren looked down at it, the eye within the crosshair, the symbol of ghost echo. She closed her fist around it. Luck, not what keeps us alive, she said quietly. It's guilt. She turned toward the door, the morning sun blinding, her figure cutting a sharp silhouette against the light. Callum's voice followed her. If they find you. They won't, she said. They'll only find what's left of their mistake. And then she was gone. Hours passed. The wind erased her footprints faster than he could follow them. By sunset, she'd reached the edge of an old highway, its asphalt cracked and half buried. A sign leaned half-broken beside it, San Diego, 112 miles. She smiled faintly, the same direction her life had ended before. That night she camped under an overpass, the stars cold and bright above her. She laid the coin beside her rifle and stared at it until her eyes blurred. When she finally slept, she dreamed something she hadn't done in years. She saw her team again, the women of Ghost Echo. They were standing in a field, no desert, no gunfire, just tall grass and wind. Echo 1 grinned. Echo 3 waved. Adeline Marrow, Callum's grandmother, rested a hand on her shoulder. You did good, sweetheart, the old woman said. You scratched the barrel. Wren laughed softly in the dream. Sorry about that. Adeline smiled. Don't be. Sometimes you have to scratch it to make people look. Wren woke before dawn, eyes damp. The world was quiet again. She cleaned her weapon, packed her things, and began walking toward the rising light. Somewhere out there, Stillwater lived. Somewhere, someone would try to perfect the conscience she'd proven imperfect on purpose. And maybe that was the point. She wasn't here to stop wars anymore. She was here to remind them that even machines could hesitate. The desert stretched ahead, endless, merciless, honest. As the first light of sun hit the coin in her hand, it glinted like a heartbeat. Ren Talovich, ghost echo, janitor, soldier, kept walking. Not to fight. Not to win. Just to clean what was left. Why did the boy come back to the firing range? Years had passed since the night it burned. The Pacific winds had long since carried the smell of smoke away. But when Callum Marsh stepped off the transport truck and saw the rebuilt facility, it felt like stepping into the ghost of a heartbeat. The range had changed. Polished walls, new surveillance systems, sterile light. But beneath the paint, beneath the gleaming tile, he could still feel her. The woman who'd once mopped these floors and hid an entire war in her silence. Chief Ren Talovich. Ghost echo. The janitor no one saw until it was too late. He walked the corridor slowly, hand brushing against the cool concrete. The sound of boots echoed, hollow. Trainees passed him, laughing, alive. None of them knew the story that lived in the walls. But he did. And he had come to finish something. In the years since the Stillwater explosion, rumors had spread like wildfire through classified channels about a malfunctioning AI that refused to fire on human targets, about autonomous drones that shut themselves down mid-mission, about a ghost in the code that whispered no before every shot. Some called it divine interference. Others called it sabotage. Callum called it her. He joined a civilian ethics division under Defense R&D, a quiet department with a louder purpose, to ensure that no algorithm ever forgot hesitation, to teach machines the one thing Ghost Echo died to protect: conscience. But he wasn't here for research today. He was here because of a message. 3 days earlier, he'd received a package, no return address, no sender name. Inside, an old challenge coin, its edges worn, the emblem faint, the same one he'd given her years ago in the desert. Only this time, a single line was scratched into the metal. Range 7, midnight. He'd known better than to hope. But hope was stubborn like guilt, like ghosts. Now under the dim lights of Range 7 he stood alone. The targets were new, the walls polished, the scent of oil and powder clean. He checked his watch, 23:58. The air felt heavy, not dangerous, not cold, just aware. And then he heard it. The faint click of a door. A figure stepped into the light at the far end of the range. Older, thinner, dressed in civilian clothes, gray jacket, gloves, hair tied back. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Callum exhaled. "You're supposed to be dead." Ren smiled faintly. "So are most of the honest people I've known." He took a step closer. "Where the hell have you been?" "Cleaning," she said simply. He almost laughed, but the emotion in his throat made it come out broken. "You disappeared after Yuma. Echo 3 said you'd gone west. I looked for you." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I didn't stay in one place." He studied her, the lines deeper now, but the eyes still sharp. "Why call me back?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small drive, its surface scratched, old. "Stillwater, not gone. You were right, it fractured. Pieces of the program survived in defense contracts, foreign labs, but one piece didn't adapt." He frowned. "What piece?" "The conscience." Ren stepped closer, placing the drive in his palm. "It's still pure, uncorrupted, the original empathy pattern, mine." He stared at it. "You saved it." She nodded. "They were trying to erase it. I couldn't let them." Callum swallowed. "So what do you want me to do with it?" Ren's gaze softened. "Teach it how to feel again." He looked at her, confused. "It's code, Ren, it doesn't feel." She smiled faintly. "Neither did I, not for a long time." For a while they stood there in silence, the hum of the lights above them the only sound. Then Callum said, "You know they still talk about you. The janitor who outshot Navy Command, the ghost who made AI hesitate." Ren chuckled softly. People always remember the wrong part. What should they remember? She looked downrange at the paper targets. That sometimes doing the right thing looks like sabotage. Her eyes lingered on the rifles lined neatly at each lane. She picked one up, a standard M40, polished, clean, impersonal. She ran her hand along the barrel like someone greeting an old friend. "Careful, sweetheart," she murmured. "You'll scratch the barrel." Callum froze. The words, the tone, it was the same line that started everything. She looked at him, the faintest trace of humor in her voice. "That's what the chief said to me the first day, the one who thought I was nobody." Callum swallowed hard. He was wrong. "No," she said gently. "He was right. I was nobody, and that's why I could do what I did." She lowered the rifle, setting it down carefully. "I didn't call you here just to hand off the data," she continued. "I called you because it's time to disappear for good." Callum shook his head. "No, you can't keep running. We can go public, show them what they did." Ren's expression turned almost sad. "You think people want the truth? They want safety, even if it's built on ghosts." He stepped closer. "Then let me help you." "You already have," she said softly. "You became the conscience they couldn't erase. That's more than any medal." She turned away, walking toward the exit. "Ren," he said quietly, "where will you go?" She paused. "Where I can do the least harm." He wanted to say something, anything, but she was already gone, her footsteps fading into the long corridor like the echo of a shot that never stopped ringing. The next morning, Callum brought the drive to his lab. He sat before the terminal, connected the device, and hesitated. The cursor blinked, waiting. "All right," he murmured. "Let's see if you're still in there." He opened the file. Lines of code filled the screen, dense, elegant, old, but something was wrong. A message appeared, hidden in the metadata, just a few words. "If you can read this, don't rebuild me. Remember me." Callum leaned back, eyes burning. She'd erased herself. The drive contained only one surviving fragment, a time-stamped voice file, 20 seconds long. He pressed play. Ren's voice came through the speaker, calm, steady, weary. "Conscience isn't code, it's a wound. You can't teach it, you can only feel it. If you're hearing this, keep the wound open. Don't let them heal it, that's how you stay human." The recording ended. He sat there for a long time, the silence pressing like gravity. Then he smiled faintly, whispering, "I'll keep it open." Outside, dawn broke over the horizon. The base awoke to another day of drills, another cycle of order and obedience. But somewhere in the world, across networks and machines, fragments of Ren's voice, her choices, her hesitation, lingered like a memory that refused deletion. Over time, engineers noticed strange behavior in new systems, drones that refused unnecessary strikes, sensors that paused when civilians appeared, targeting AIs that whispered warnings through the static before pulling power. No one could trace the origin. They just called it the Talovich anomaly. And in quiet rooms where programmers tested new military intelligence, sometimes, when the code lagged or glitched, a faint female voice could be heard through the static. Calm, resolute, almost tender. "Careful, sweetheart," it would whisper. "You'll scratch the barrel." Most dismissed it as interference. A ghost in the machine. But Callum knew better. He'd walk the firing range at night sometimes, long after the recruits were gone, the air heavy with the scent of gunpowder and ghosts. He'd stop at lane 7, look downrange at the paper targets, and listen. And in the silence sometimes, he could almost hear her breathing, slow, steady, precise. He'd raise his own rifle, line the sights, exhale. And just before he squeezed the trigger, he'd hear that same voice again. Not from the machine. From memory. "Don't shoot to prove, shoot to protect." The shot cracked through the range, clean and centered. He lowered the weapon, smiling faintly. "Still teaching me, huh?" The air didn't answer, but he didn't need it to. Because some teachers don't leave lessons. They leave echoes. Years later, when Callum retired and the world shifted again, when machines fought wars people no longer could, the ethics board that guided those AIs was named in her honor. The Talovich Principle. All precision must remember hesitation. It became law. And humanity, for all its flaws, carried a little more conscience into its machines. Somewhere in a storage archive, buried under decades of encrypted files, Ren Talovich's name still appeared, attached to a decommissioned maintenance log. Rank civilian technician. Status terminated. Remarks no longer on record. And maybe that was how she wanted it. Because in the end, she didn't need statues or stories. She only needed the silence between shots, the moment where a hand trembles and a choice becomes human again. The kind of silence she taught the world to listen for. And somewhere, if you stood very still in range 7 after dark, under the hum of the lights and the faint smell of bleach, you could swear you saw her shadow, just for a second, mop in one hand, rifle slung across her back. The janitor who shot a Navy commander. The ghost who gave machines a soul. The woman who cleaned the floor one last time and left it spotless. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.